we're starting off with the starter kit because it is the easiest way to get going on tests. And the starter kit has multiple files, an index page, and at the bottom of the index page it has this runner script which it includes. And if you put a question mark test as a query param, it will write all of this extra stuff which allows you to inject the test stuff. And then we have three parts in that. The first one is the root element, which lets you inject into any element. So I do this often when I use Ember and Rails. So I have a layout in Rails that I want to say, okay, well, insert my Ember app right here and still use the common layout, but inject it right here in this view. So then set it for testing. What that does is it will defer the readiness of the application so that you can get all your tests ready to go before the app actually runs, and it sets the router's location to none. What that does is makes it so that when you run tests, it won't mess with your URL and throw stuff off. And then the last part is inject test helpers, and this is what gets called to add all of your custom test helpers, which you write, and I think the test helpers that are already part of it. So that's what that is. So let's go ahead and write our own test. So just so we know it works, we have I can pass. All right, and so we do OK, true, and so can you. And if we open up our browser, I'm going to do a couple of things real quick. So first off, I'm going to, so this is just the app, but I have this thing set up, this Python, no, actually it's a Node module, HTTP server. I run it, so now I can load up my app on port 8080. And you can see, why are we not working? No, it should be loaded. Well, all right, maybe it doesn't have anything by default anymore. I thought it did, but maybe they recently changed it and removed the default stuff that's there. So anyway.
It should have something from the app.js has
index. Yeah, it's all there.
Sorry, really stupid question. Can you run something like this through like NAM? It's like a development environment, or no?
Run through what?
Through NAM.
MAMP? Yeah, absolutely.
Or like,
yeah, you could just pull up the
file. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So here, we can just do that if you want. I'm going to need the server a little later, but you see right here, I just open up the file directly, and it works. And if I do question mark test at the end, you'll see that that also works. And you're not seeing it down here, and I'll explain why here in a minute. But don't worry about that down here. But right here is where that Ember testing div is that we're injecting the app at. So, okay, so we have a successful test. We're doing good. Let's move on. And close that out. All right, so the biggest thing right now that people do in Ember is, that's poorly worded, the most common testing practice in Ember is integration currently. It's the easiest, and integration tests are generally used to test important workflows within your application. They require the application to be running in test mode, and they emulate the user's interaction and confirm expected results. So think Selenium test type thing, or Capybara test, or what it might be for Ruby developers, but basically you're emulating, you're interacting with the browser. So there are test helpers that Ember gives you using Ember testing, which is a library that I think they added maybe 4 or 5 months ago. And there are 5 of them. Let me kind of zoom in here on these. Boom, 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 boom. Visit, find, which is like a jQuery element finder. Fill in. Fill in lets you enter content into some input, click, and then key event where you can actually trigger key events. Now, every one of these, it's important to know, returns a promise that's fulfilled when the resulting async behavior is complete. So basically what this does is it uses the global, it uses this helper, I have my cheat sheet. It uses a global promise object and automatically chains onto that promise object if it exists. Okay? It allows you to write your test without worrying about async behavior. Your helper might trigger. Okay, there you go. So, you guys made me cheat. There we go, that's better. Okay, so now we're going to do some TDD. So, again, I've been practicing this. I think I know what I want to do, but I don't know. All right, are we back?
Give it a second to load.
Okay. Sorry, everyone. I got Command Q crazy. Okay, one sec. People want to see my face.
He's like, why do I want the screen? What's that? Yeah, it is working.
I'm a little embarrassed
Late
now.
by 30 seconds.
That's okay. All right. Sorry, everyone. We're back. And I closed everything out. So let me open it up again. Okay, here's the app. Color scheme. Eclipse. Now, there's an app that where is it? Live Reload. You guys use Live Reload? Use it in like Live Reload is built into browser, not built in, but there's extensions for browsers and whatnot. Well, instead of every change I go and hit refresh on the browser to show the test, I'd rather just kind of have that do its own thing. So I'm just going to use Live Reload, wherever it went, and I'll add that project from the desktop. Okay. So now if I come back to my browser, I'm going to go to, I'm going to try and do this again too. Server 48080. Loca. Loca. Okay, cool. It looks like it's working. I'm just getting some bug. It's caching. Okay. All right, test. I'm going to refresh this a few times and turn on that. So now we should see this thing load automatically. So let's go ahead and do some stuff. I thought a lot about what I wanted to show you guys as far as building. So there's an address book that Ryan Florence uses a lot, and there's an open API that you can access that does stuff. So I kind of want to TDD into that. So the goal is to build a very simple address book, and we're not going to get too far into it, but I wanted to kind of show you how I would do it. The first thing I would do is get rid of this. Let's make sure that this is working. Get it removed. Not yet. Oh, there we go. All right, so, and we're going to rename this thing test helpers or test setup. And all right, let's see here. So we have our test setup, and then that way it's not confusing as to like, this is not where my test started, this is where my setup is. And I'm going to create a folder here called integration. And then in the integration folder, I'm going to create a contacts test tests.js file. And here is where we're going to have our tests. So module, integration, contacts, and excuse me, we have a setup function, and a teardown function. All right, so the setup is where I like to put the app.reset. And the reason I put it in the setup, what that does is it clears out your application. So, okay, boom, start over, wipes everything. I like to have that in the setup versus the teardown, because then when I run the test, I can actually see it in my little window on my QUnit runner. And it's really cool, I'll show you. So first thing we want to do is say, okay, well, shows contacts list on home page, something like that. Okay. So remember, we're going to use our helpers. So visit, we're going to visit the home page. And now there's something called and then. And what and then does is it takes all of the promises, those test helper promises that are run, and when they're all done completing, it then runs the and then. So basically it's the final to do for everything that was queued up prior. And you can nest them if you want. But so saying, okay, visit that. So that's a promise. Once that resolves, then it goes to and then. We can give it a function. And here we want to say we expect there to be LI, like an unordered list, and I want 3 items on that unordered list. And so there are 3 contacts. And there we go. So we come back over to our tests, and it actually did rerun. The problem is we now need to update our runner to have the those tests show up. So we no longer have that. We have test setup, and now we have test, integration, contacts, test. So there we go. So now the weird thing is we have a passing test. Why do we have a passing test? Well, it's the starter kit's fault, because it gives us something that we're already doing. So I'm like, well, that's not what I want. So I want my first test to, I want my first person on that list to be Ryan. First dot text the first contact is Ryan. So now it'll run the test and it fails. Like, no. So the part of TDD is like, okay, you write a failing test, then you fix it as easily as possible, then you refactor it. So we're going to go ahead and fix it as easily as possible. And we're going to do that by going into our app. Let's see here. App. And in our app, we're going to change first name to Ryan. Yay! Big money. And I'm going to go ahead and change the other ones while we're here. And the only reason I have these names is these are the ones that show up on the API. And I want to explain that with the API, it's going to be different. So we're going to have Ryan, and then we have Stanley, and then myself. All right. So you see over here, we have the app actually showing up. Oh, geez, I'm doing like crazy stuff. So we have the app showing up over here, and you can see it shows Eric. It shows the 3 names. Now, if I had in my in my contacts, if I had the app reset here, we wouldn't see that because at the very end it would clear out. So does that make sense? So it's kind of a preference thing, but for me, I like it there. As long as you reset it before the test run, that's all that matters. Whether it's reset before at the end of the last test or the beginning of your test, I understand that to be all that matters. So, all right, well, we're doing good so far. So now I want to be able to, let's see here. Let's say test add a new contact to the list. It's that one character that's hard for me. All right, so this time we're going to visit this. Now we're going to say, okay, well, we're going to expect, oh, there's one other thing I want to do here. I want to say we expect two tests to run on that one. So here we got the 2 tests. So come down here and say, all right, we want to fill in a input with the ID of name with the value of Jake. We're going to do you. All right, so lucky. And then we got to click the button. So click button dot. What did you say, teacher's pet? What did you say?
Jake's in the club.
We're all geeks here. All right, so you can see now we're doing a few things. We visit, fill in, click. So those are all queuing up, and they go to that global promise object. And then once they're done, and then happens and gets called.
They maintain order.
They do maintain order, yeah. And then gets called, and now we can do tests. So okay, so now what we want to test is, actually we want to just basically copy this. I copied 22 lines. Two. See, I'm getting better. All right, so now there are 4 people, and we want Jake, but sorry, Jake, you're going to appear at the bottom. So we're going to make you the last. So, all right, so now we have this test that is running. There are 3 contacts. First contact is Ryan. Now, why aren't you run? Oh, why isn't this one working? No, it should be showing. Oh, I was zoomed into one of the tests. So yeah, I ended up. So I have to click on this sometimes, and it takes me back out so I can see. It's like ID name not found in. So I'm like, all right, well we got to create that. So let's go to our index page. No, it's not there. Index HTML. All right, so let's create our form. In our form, we're going to create an action, add contact on submit. And then we're going to have our input, type equals text, value equals name. So that's going to, oh no, that's not going to do it. ID equals name. That will do it. And then I want to say placeholder equals name. And now we need a button where the class is create. Add contact, or just do add button. Okay, so now we go back, we watch our test run, and it doesn't work. But you see this little window over here, you'll see that it does have the form, but it didn't do anything. So what are we getting? Nothing handled the action add contact. Okay, I can do that. So now we need to go back into our app, and we need to create a controller to handle this. So I'm going to say app.indexController equals ember.arrayController.extend. And here we're going to have an actions object that will have our, what was it, add contact? Thank you. All right, so we have our add contact. So var name equals this dot get name. And then, because we're an array controller, we can push to ourselves. So we're going to say this dot push object name. There we go. And it worked. It's not showing up down here, but if we actually run that test itself, you'll see there we are. It does work. So, make sense? All right. Now, there's one more thing that I thought. You know what's annoying is that your name is still in there. And I want to get rid of that. So, last thing we want to do is add a test for saying, okay, you know what? We also want equal find was it name dot val to be blank. Form is blank again. Okay, that's going to break because we have 3 tests instead of 2. So let's change that and say nope. Sorry, it's still Jake. So let's go ahead and change the app and say, okay, now this dot set name is no. And we have a test, right? Yeah.
What's the expect for it, like the number 2 or 3? Is that a Q unit thing?
It's a Q unit thing. So as far as I understand, and you guys correct me, Q unit might not know when the tests are over. So if you have tests that might be delayed because of whatever, it doesn't know when it's done. So you say expect 3, it's going to expect 3 assertions on the final assertion that test is over. And so that's why it's important, especially when you're doing async testing like we are right now.
It won't wait on it, but it'll say if you got to the end of it, if you didn't hit those 3, it'll throw that as one of your assertions.
Yeah.
I thought 3 were coming, I only got 2.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So I think we're good on this so far. We still got a lot to cover, so let's see here. I got to go back to my.
You coded very well in front of everybody.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I've done this. I've coded this application maybe 8 times now. So I practiced. So all right, let me zoom through these here. So to show you, this is you'll see how different my code is from. Let's see here. Okay, so this is what I had before. So same thing. Expect 2, expect 3 should look almost identical from what we had. We had to add the form into our app, and then in here we modified our index route and added an index controller, and we're good. So now let's move on to test helpers, custom test helpers. I didn't know that these things existed, but they're really cool. They're really, really cool. There are 2 types of test helpers that you can use. One of them is just a standard test helper, which the best way to explain it would just be show an example. So I can write a test helper saying should have element with count, and it'll take in it takes a function. I don't understand all the technicalities of it, but the first attribute being passed in or the first param is always the app, and the last one is always context. And I think inside is just kind of like whatever you want to pass in, pass in. So in this one, the selector would be the jQuery selector, and the n would be the number of times. So you see here, it does a find with assert, make sure that the element exists, and then it gets the count of that element, and then it performs the Q unit test right there. So the other kind that we have is register async helper. What this allows you to do is create something just like the visit or fill in, and it lets you kind of bundle them up if you want, and create a single one, and it gets injected into that global promise object just like everything else, and gets weighted on, and you know what I mean? So it's treated just the same. So let's go ahead and add those real quick into our test setup. So remember, the inject test helpers is what adds those into our app. So we need to come in before that. So I'm just going to put them in here for helpers And so our first one, I'm just going to copy. All right, so we have that. So now let me go ahead and split this. Dude, this buffer gator keeps messing with my columns. All right. Yeah. Okay, so what do we have open? We have our test set up. Let's open our test and say, oh, let's open our test in a vertical. S, nope, I. There we go. All right, so what we want to do is change this out and say should have element with count, UL, LI, and 3. And that can go away. Same thing here. That can go away. And if we go back to our test, it should still pass. Come out here, and there we go. It still passes. This is add new contact to the list. Still works. But the difference being my message is now found 4 times because that's what is appearing right here. Async helper as well. Let me see if I can do this up in memory. Test.register async helper, and then we're going to say add contact. That's right, I combine my quotes. Function app, and then app and context, and then everything in between. So we're just going to add name and then context. And here, for those watching, I'm new to Vim as far as full development. For you guys, you already know. So we're going to take these two right here and move them in. And the only difference is I'm going to replace this with name. Okay, and why don't we take this out and say we want to add contact. I'm going to do, who else here? We got Derek. We have Jason G. And of course we got to add Jake back in. Sorry, Jake, you're last. We're going to change that to 6, and let's see if we still pass. All right, we're still passing. So those are helpers. Very helpful. Well named. Okay. Moving along. Testing the, so this is the part that I was the most nervous about, because this is the part that to me is the best part of testing, is to separate your application from any services that it might be calling, and to be able to kind of encapsulate, just test the small part you want to test. And so we're gonna cover this as far as kind of iteratively. So we're going to take this code and we're going to put it into our application. And I want to walk you through how this works. So if we have our application here, so what I have is, instead of Ember Model or Ember Data, I'm using Ember Eric, which is just plain old Ajax. So you can see here our address book. What that does is it just returns an object with a key of contacts, and then that contacts key contains an array of people. So I'll show you what that looks like real quick. Let's fire that puppy up. So that's what it looks like. All right. That's going to, so I create, add the URL, I create an Ember mutable array as contacts. Then I go through and perform the Ajax get JSON, returns the promise, so I call the promise here, it iterates over the contacts, creates a new contact, so app.contact.create, with that data, and then it pushes that object onto this contacts array and it returns it. So that's a very, very basic find that you can do just by hand. This is what I do a lot. There's a lot more involved if you want to get into like caching and all that stuff, but for me this is enough for a lot of what I do. So now if we want to integrate this, let's go down to our model and return app.contact.find. All right? So let's go back to our tests, and we have a bunch of broken tests. So why do we have broken tests? You have turned on testing mode, which disables the run loop. So, segue. Yeah, so now we have the issue that we've been talking about. We have to wrap our stuff in the run loop. How do we do that? So I went through and tried to figure it out on my own, and I had to ask a lot of people a lot of questions, and they ended up helping me basically write it for me. So what was presented, this shows the problem in the test that will not pass. So what was presented was this wrapper around Ajax. And this wrapper, what it does is it returns a promise, a true promise, which is what Ember needs, Ember testing needs. It also wraps the success and the error in an Ember run. So that makes it so that we can actually use it. What I did was I just copied this, just like that, and I put it up here, and then we don't need it if you guys don't care. Okay, and then I just changed that to Ajax. So everything else is the same. But now if we go back to our test, okay, we're getting further, but now look what's happening. It's trying to find Ryan as a first contact, but instead we're iterating over objects, so we have objects in there.
Can you explain just briefly the Ajax function, exactly why that, what was making that, what problem was solving? They added it into a run loop? What portion?
Well, before, yeah, so it creates, what gets returned is an Ember promise with two of these functions. I don't understand it as well as I'd like to.
I can explain it.
Please, yeah, please.
Right, so essentially what was happening before, so you're getting essentially kind of a jQuery promise before. What was happening is when the success or error would actually come back, it wouldn't start up a run loop for you. So what would happen is it would try and return those objects, and then it would start up a whole bunch of things that would start the run loop. But it's like, hey, what the hell?
Oh yeah.
Run loop's not on because you're in testing mode. So what this does is anytime success or error comes back and then you get your JSON back, it's actually going to say, okay, hey, I want you to start with run loop, and I want you to start, either resolve or reject with data.
Well, he said, yeah.
Well, there's really two issues, right? One is that jQuery's promises aren't real promises.
Right.
And then there's the need for a run for the thing.
Right.
Two separate things, but handled in one place.
Handled in one place, absolutely. So thank you guys. So that's what this solves. So that's great, but wouldn't it be one? Oh wait, we got a broken test. So now our app is returning. It's returning an object instead of a string. So let's go. I'm going to get rid of that, and then we're going to go to our index page here, and each item in model, we're going to say item dot first because it's the first name that gets returned. So now you can say, all right, well that works, but now we have more broken tests. The reason that we have more broken tests is why? Sorry?
You're pushing things onto the array.
Absolutely. So now I need to go back in and convert the. So now here, that's kind of why I had this set apart as separately. So we could say app.contact.create, and then say first is that. And now we have tests that pass. So yeah, But what you're saying now is it's actually going out to a live API and pulling it, and that's where these names are coming from. We don't have hard-coded any names anymore. But the problem with that is now we have to rely on an external API for our test, which is, you can't do that. But let me get back to my slides so I know where I'm at. Okay, so you can do it manually. I have in my slides a JS bin, or a JS fiddle that has all of this stuff that you can look at, but it's basically what we just did. There is a solution called IC Ajax, which is a library that you can include in your app, written here locally by Ryan Florence, and it essentially does the same thing. It is an Ember-friendly jQuery wrapper. It returns a true promise. It makes apps more testable, and it makes testing Ajax simpler with fixture support. So that's another really cool thing, is now we have fixture support, which I'll show you. However, there are two exceptions with IC Ajax. One of them is that success and error callbacks aren't supported. Instead, it uses something different. It doesn't resolve the 3 arguments like regular Ajax does. So, best explained by a slide. You can see if I have that up there, return Ajax foo, down here it has the result object. Well, first off, if you just get Ajax foo, it's just going to return the response. So it goes straight to the response, it skips all the other stuff. If you want the other stuff, you can do ajax.raw, and then it comes back as an object, not as 3. It doesn't come back with 3 items. It comes back with an object that contains the 3 items. So here's an example of using fixtures with what they have, or from their documentation. So you can say ic.ajax to find fixture, give it the 3 parts of the response, and then anytime you make a call using IC Ajax, it will use that. So let's go ahead and add that to our app. So IC Ajax, and I wanted to do everything from scratch so you guys can kind of see, like, you know what I mean?
This isn't smoke and mirrors.
It's not smoke and mirrors. There's
no Photoshop here.
all of this is old teach me to code days here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to their main here. So this is the latest IC Ajax from master, and I'm going to go to my console and wget-p JS lib, and then I'm going to download it to there, and then and now let me start the server again. And over here, JS libs, let me move it to ic-ajax.js. And because this isn't just a test, we're not just using it for a test, we're actually going to wrap all of our Ajax with it and go into our index and add it in here. I'm just going to add it right below Ember. So ic-ajax.js. And now we can come back into our test. I'm sorry, not our test, our app. And we can get rid of all of this. The only difference is var ajax equals ic.ajax. So now, if everything worked proper, our test should still pass. And they do. So, same thing. But now we want to be able to add fixtures so we're not hitting any external services. So let's do that real quick. Come into our test, contacts test. All right, there we go. And in here on our setup, I want to do that. I want to add the fixture. So this is the format. And here we want to return basically the same object that we're getting here. I'm going to cut it down quite a bit, but right here's our response. So let's cut it down. I'm just going to return the first name because that's really all we need. All right, but I don't want it to be the exact same value. So who else do we have here? We have Bob. We have Derek. Is that how you spell it? Yeah. And Jason. No, Dan's not in it. Dan, I look straight. Honestly, I look straight at him like, shit, I forgot his name. Sorry, Dan. You're not geeky enough here, Dan. Okay.
I'm not the teacher's pet. He doesn't even
Yeah, sorry, Dan. All right. So the only other thing is here I need to replace this with the actual URL, and I could put that in some sort of global, but I'm just going to do it here for now. Okay. So now we come down here, and we should have broken tests because this test right here should break. See if it does. Okay. Hey. So now we got Bob as the first one. Yay, Bob, breaking test. So now we can go in and say, okay, well, Bob is now our. There we go.
Fixture aspect, that'll actually intercept the URL.
Yeah, so the way it works is it actually overrides the AJAX call, like jQuery's AJAX on Windows, as far as I understand.
Yeah, it's just a hash map. So when you call that URL, it looks up on that hash map and say, do we have a fixture for this URL? If so, return the fixture, otherwise make the AJAX.
Circuits.
Yeah, you can actually see it. And I was playing with this earlier. You can see it by doing ic.ajax.fixtures. And then you can see that's essentially what you just said. So here's what it returns, and here's the key that it goes off of. So if you ever want to clear it out, you can override that. Now the problem with this is now that's permanent for all of my tests until I clear that out. So I don't know, what would you do? Would you just clean it out right here, or would you?
What we do is we inject AJAX through the AMD module.
Uh-huh.
So you're getting a new thing every time.
Yeah.
And as a result, you don't have to worry about that between tests.
So, well, if we need it, we'll redefine it. But yeah, I mean, this again is a very simplistic way of doing it. So there we go. So you could see, Bob, I did have you on my slide. I was thinking about you. You're last, though. I mean, yeah. All right. So there we go. And here's an example that you could find on JS Fiddle that has the code that I'm trying to live code. So now let's talk about testing handlebars helpers. Helpers are actually very simple to test. Before, on the Ember App Kit, what you had to do was you had to create a route and a template that's accessible, where you embed where you actually add the handlebars helpers, and then you create an integration test that goes there and just verifies that the output is correct, which is annoying and hard. I was talking to, and you guys know me, I'm the biggest name dropper ever. I'm so proud to like name drop. So my friend Robert Jackson, he's my friend. I know he has 2 kids. That's all I know. All right.
R. Jackson.
It's RWJ Blue. And this is what would Robert do. Sorry, Robert, if you're watching. Anyway, always a party. So he did this where he said, okay, well, here's a couple of helpers that will let you create that view on the fly and then append your template onto that view and then call the helper directly on it. So it's essentially kind of a backdoor into creating your own thing without having to do that. So I can't explain it as well as probably half of you guys could, but I'm going to assume that we kind of understand it will work. So to me, what's important is copy paste this, and then the test part is the easy part. So I'm going to copy paste this into our test helpers again, or our test setup, and we'll put it right here. Thanks, J Blue. All right. Oops. And now we go into our contacts tests, And no, now we want to actually create a new folder. So we're going to create a new folder called unit, and in unit we're going to create a new folder called helpers. And now, oops, MA helpers slash, and now we want to create one called capitalize. So let's do capitalize helper. We'll call it upcase because that's what my slides say. Upcase helper or upcase test.js. Okay. So here's how you test. Really simple. So we want to have something called upcase, and then something, and then when it renders out, it's all uppercase. Really, really, really simple. Let's go ahead and copy this in, and we can get a broken test. That's what we want. It's all about the TDD. Now it's not showing up, and we know it's not showing up because we need to add it to our runner, and come in here, unit, and now helpers, upcase tests, and that's not going to work. All right, so now couldn't find property upcase on an object, so it doesn't know that the helper's there because it's not there. So let's write the helper real quick.
This is specifically unit test the templates, right?
This is the unit test, the handlebars helper.
Yeah. Oh.
Handlebars helpers.
Oh, sorry.
So when you write, so I should probably start with this. So we have, what is it? There's ember.handlebars.helper and give it a name of upcase, and then function, and passing in value, and then value.to, is it to uppercase? Return, and then, what's that? I'm hoping. I'm trying to do everything TDD. That's everything we've done tonight. I've been trying to do that. So, and to be honest, the only reason I wanted to push this is for me. I want to teach myself that discipline, and I'm finding that as I'm doing this, it becomes a lot more fun to write this code. TDD in JavaScript is a lot more fun than I thought it would be. It does, yeah, absolutely. So now we have that, and now we have a passing test. And if we rerun that, you could see it's not outputting anything, but yeah. So there we go. That's how you test handlebars or helpers. Next, testing routes with some sprinkles of sign-on.js. So who's used sign-on before? Wow, yeah, a lot of us. Okay, cool. I'm fairly new to sign-on, but I'm really liking it. Sign-on is a mocking, is it a framework or is it just tools or whatever it is? Yeah, mocking library. Thank you. It's a mocking. Stop. Yeah. I was going to say stop mocking me, but that's no. We're all friends here. Stupid jokes are okay. Okay, so testing routes is. I'm just going to go through this. I'm not even going to code this out with you guys. Well, maybe I will. Yeah, I'll code it out with you guys. So let's go ahead and do it. All right, tests. We're going to put that in unit, add routes, and now we want to create a test for index test.js. So that's assuming that it's a route. Open that module unit tests or unit routes index. All right, setup. Now, even though these say they're unit tests, they're not unit tests because they do a small part, but they still require the application to run. And again, it's pulling off the global because that's how the starter kit is set up. So we'll do app.reset. And now we want to test. This part I didn't practice a lot, so I'm just going to copy. It exists. So, oh, yeah, up here, we want to get the route. So var route equals, oh, sorry. Yeah. So we have a route and expected model. We'll get to expected model later, but the var route is this. Why am I recording? I don't know.
There's a
No.
really funny Stack Overflow about recording that.
Q. Thank you. All right. So I get a new instance of my index route. Come down here saying, okay, route exists. Route is an instance of Ember route.
You want to get rid of that GKK?
Oh, thank you. All right. So I didn't add the test yet. So we got to go to a runner. Helpers, routes, index test. There we go. So it does exist. But now what we want to do is be able to test the model, right? So we want to test the model function and make sure that it is returning what we want it to do. To do that, I want to mock what the model function calls so that I can say, all right, well, I know in my model, let me switch over to the model real quick here. Go to our app. Our model returns app.contact.find. Now, that's not what we're testing. Well, it is what we're testing. Anyway, all I want to do is make sure that it returns an object. So this test is actually kind of lame, what I'm writing, but at least I can show you sign on and how you can use sign on with it. And then you can make the test better. But to me, yeah, the test, we're not testing a lot, but we are testing some stuff. So here we want to use sign on. Let me add sign on to it. Again, everything we're doing here is from scratch. So, all right, where's my console? Okay, we'll get -p js lib sign on. Okay, start our server up again. Now we need to go into our. Oh, I added that to the wrong one. So it's not actually a lib that's part of the app. It's a lib that's part of the test suite. So I want to move that into test/vendor. And now you see it's right here. Let's go into our runner and include that in our runner right after QUnit. Any questions so far? I'm kind of not really.
I have a question about, I guess you used the CI Ajax to mock up fixtures in the other tests, but then you're going to use, this might be a question, but are you going to use you're going to mock out the server with the SYNON in this particular case? Why not just use SYNON in both cases, or the Ajax, CI Ajax filters in those cases?
Well, that's a great question. So for those listening, the question is, if we are using the IC Ajax fixture for the one test, why are we using that for both, or why are we not using, is it SYNON?
SYNON's added.
Yeah, the sign-on, SYNON, whatever, for both. SYNON. Yeah. SYNON. So the reason is because in this test, in our context test, hold on. In our context test, what we're doing is we still want to test the functionality within the find of what is, because it's actually doing something with that stuff. And that's what we're testing. We're testing what it's doing with the data that's returned from the AJAX request. Whereas in the route, we're not testing the model, we're testing the route itself. So all we want to know is we want to stub out some value that it returns, and then in our route, when you say model, it actually returns the object that whatever that find returns. So it could return anything. It doesn't really matter. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're testing more interaction at this level, and other than you're testing the method by itself in isolation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and hopefully it'll make more sense as I go. So, Bob did help me a lot on this. One of the things that Bob learned through this is that you usually want to sandbox your tests with sign-on. Sandboxing, I don't understand it completely. Bob, can you explain?
Sandboxing in sign-on, what it will do is it basically takes everything. If you have a method like, I'm assuming you're going to stub out the app.contact.find
Yes.
method in sign-on. So what sign-on does is says, oh, here's the original state of where that was, stub it out, run your test, and then it will reset it. It cleans the sandbox out when it's all done. It does all that for you by running it kind of in its own little scope, and it keeps track of that for you. That's how I understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. So here, let me show you. I would create.
Yeah, the trick here is like how he wrote that sign-on test there on the function. I don't know if you're going to explain this. Sorry if I'm stuck.
No, please.
That if you don't do that, you have to manually tear down your stubs when you're done with your test, or someone won't do it for you. So that sign-on, that test inside your function there is important.
Perfect. Thank you. Again, I'm learning as I'm going, so I appreciate your help.
I spent a few hours trying to figure out.
So I'm going off of memory on this, but I think for sign-on you do sign-on.stub, and then you give it an object, and then the function that you want to call. So we're going to say app.contact, and then we want to give it the function, which is find, and then we want to say returns.
Yeah, returns and then
returns an object. So, and this object we're going to say, it's going to return an array, and it really could be anything. So in fact, I'm just going to have it return hi, and that's going to be our expected model equals hi, and returns expected model. So whenever in this test, whenever we call app.contact.find, it's going to return hi, and that's it. And we got the extra sign-on goodness of saying we can find out if this method was called. So now we say, okay, is it route.model? Or say model equals route.model, and then we say equal model expected model. Model is expected model, and I'm sure I'm screwing this up, and then another thing we can do is we can say was called. So we can say equal app.contact. Is it a string? Sorry, I got to cheat. Okay, yeah, so I was way off. So I'm going to just copy all of this. So you saw what I did live coding. Now here's what I actually did. Whoa! John said he was coming tonight, but he didn't come. Anyway, so John, you're getting replaced. Dan. There we go. So you can see it stubs it out, returns. So down here, when we call route.model, it actually calls that function on the route, returns the model, and it does that check. And then on line 6 down here, you can see it says stub was called. It makes sure that stub was called. So that returns true. And then just app.attendee.find was called. Now, there's a lot of stuff you can do in sign-on saying, okay, well, how many times was it called? What was it called with? And you can specify a lot more, but there's a lot of stuff there that you can work with. Yeah?
To go back to Sterling's question, the reason for sign-on here, though, is because you can check to verify that some side effect was called when you get the route. model, as opposed to the fixtures just returns data when you ask for it. What comes back here doesn't really matter. It's the fact that when the route tries to pull up the model, we want to make sure that app.contact.client is called in, which is what we think the logic of that thing should be doing. And
So
sign-on will let you check that those kind of things were hit, whereas ICAJAX will only just return back some data for you. You may be trained using it.
exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just, I guess you pulled in Ajax in the other case, whereas my go-to would probably been just sign on.
If you're going to use it anyway, maybe use it.
Yeah, uses in both places. So, so I guess it can be used in the other place then, and it was just kind of.
It can. I actually tried. I had a hard time with it. I had a really hard time with
Realistically,
it.
what you could do is if you had a wrapper, like how you were explaining before, like you'd take and you'd written your own Ajax wrapper around that, you could essentially take sign-on at that point and stub that Ajax with it.
Yeah.
To return back whatever fixture data, whatever data you want. At that point, so we do the same. It accomplish the same thing.
So. All right, the last section I want to talk about is unit testing, and I only have one thing to say, is it's coming. So I was going to present on it. The problem is that they're still figuring it out. There are some things that they're doing which is going to make testing great, that doesn't require you to run the app. It's kind of built but not completed, and it should be done within a month,